welcome everybody tonight to the Hacking HR Kansas City chapter discussion about healthy seasonal habits, presented by Crystal Rodenbaugh, LCSW, and Jordan Tung, co-founder of Nookshuk. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our speakers. If this is your first time joining us, we welcome you. Hacking HR is a global community of HR and business leaders, practitioners, consultants, technologists, and many others passionate about the intersection of work, technology, people, and organizations. We are business trailblazers, guiding people and organizations to thrive in the new world of work. We address global trends and topics, driving the conversation and solutions that co-create at a local level, just like here in Kansas City, through members just like you and me. No one person owns Hacking HR Kansas City, is completely voluntary in existence, but is guided by a group of liaisons. The role of the liaison team is to help bring conversations like the one we're about to experience tonight into existence. If you enjoy the conversation this evening, I would either would like to be a contributing member of the liaison team or even a future speaker, please let us know. We're always on the lookout for growth in the Kansas City community. Now on to our main event. Our speakers this evening both believe in education, support, and self-improvement. Since 2015, Crystal Rodenbaugh, a licensed clinical social worker, top-rated therapist, and author on various motivation blog sites, has been leading and growing a group practice here in Kansas City named Tenfold Consulting. There, she enjoys working with busy professionals, helping them discover more confidence, more freedom, and more meaning in their everyday lives. Jordan Tung, along with co-founder Ann Konechny, has been busy developing Nookshuk, a digital self-improvement platform that helps people track and rely on trusted community for accountability and encouragement. Both these speakers have joined up for our conversation this evening to share their knowledge and expertise. From their respective vantage points, each will share their perspectives on the creation and continuous support of healthy habits, especially during this time of year. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you both know how delighted we are that you were able to join us this evening. Thank you for being here. With that, I will turn things over to Crystal to get us started. Crystal, take it away.
Hi, yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. So tonight I just kind of wanted to share some suggestions and encouragement as it relates to some helpful habits. And I was going to talk a little bit about as a physical health, emotional health, and then even relational health. And then I'll introduce you to Jordan, who'll tell you about his technology and how that can probably intersect some of the ideas that I talk about. So you probably won't hear anything too earth-shattering because I think we all kind of know like what's best for us, what's good for us. We all know we need to eat well, exercise, spend time with people that we care about. So again, probably not too earth-shattering, but I'm hopeful that I can maybe inspire you to think about things a little differently from a different perspective. So first of all, I love summer. And so going into winter, I always think about like, oh man, the season is changing and I prefer to be outdoors. So what do I do now? So to kind of open it up, if I were to ask the question, hey, what kind of activity or habit do you have that you might do during like the summer or warmer months? You might say running, hiking, biking, outdoor sports like sand volleyball, gardening, something like that, which I can totally relate to. I love all of those things. But what do you do when it becomes cold outside? You might think like, oh, well, I guess that's the end of that. I can't do that in wintertime, or I just dress warmer and do it anyway. Maybe I take it indoors, which are all options. But one thing I thought about is, or proposed to you, is what if instead of seeing it as like a complete loss and like dreading going into the winter season and thinking that you can't participate in those same activities, is to kind of shift perspective a little bit and think about, okay, so I may not be able to do this, but what can I add that I might not normally have the opportunity to do? So like if you're spending a lot of time outdoors in warmer months, you might not have a lot of opportunity to try new recipes in cooking, or to use your creative side on the art perspective of, painting or crocheting or whatever that may look like. And so when you go into winter, instead of dreading it, you can shift perspective and think like, okay, I may not get to do this, but I now have the opportunity to do that. And just that small shift in perspective can actually be like a game changer. You're not thinking about, oh, I just have to get through this time, but you might actually begin to look forward to it. So if you can think about that, I challenge you to think, okay, what can I add, versus only focusing on what I'm potentially losing out on because the weather's changed. So that was a little bit about physical and emotional benefits to that as well. But what about those habits that we can do all year long? So what are those things that are good for us as relation to mental health or emotional health? So if I were to ask you, if we were in person, I might say, hey, what do you do? And you might say, well, I journal, or I'm told that I should journal. I go to a counselor regularly. I love to read helpful books, or books that are insightful or that help me in leadership or just self-growth. Maybe you do meditation, yoga, maybe you're mindful of what you're grateful for. All good things, all good things. But what do you do when you like go to sit down and do some of that and you're like, oh, I'm not super into it today, or I don't really have time for that, or maybe I don't have accountability, so who's going to really ask me if I'm doing those things? So I would see that as like, those are the challenges. So like if you go to the gym, you might meet someone there, so it's easier to have accountability, or someone might ask you how you're doing. But on the personal development side, you may not have someone who asks you like, hey, how are you doing with this? But I want to ask a question of, if you had a standing appointment with like a mentor or a coach or an advisor or a supervisor or a trusted friend every week, what would you do with that appointment? Do you look forward to it? Do you cancel it frequently? Do you feel heard or supported in those meetings? And again, if we were in person, my assumption would be is that you're like, yeah, I love going to that because it creates like a lot of value, and I feel heard, and I just love being a part of those things. So if that's true for you to show up for an appointment where you meet someone else who can speak into your life, why do you think that we, myself included, often cancel or take away the habit where we show up for ourselves? Why is that the first thing that we get rid of? And being in the role that I am as a counselor, I hear a lot of things and I do some of those things too. But my hope and my suggestion would be is, if you show up consistently for yourself like you would for someone else, what do you think the benefit would be to just overall career, relationships, just how you feel about yourself? And would you see value in that? And again, if we were in person, I might see you being like, yeah, that's kind of true. That's probably right. So one of the things that people, why we cancel on ourselves is sometimes we have that lack of value, or see the lack of value in ourselves, and it's easier to show up for someone else. But again, if you challenge yourself and you think like, okay, if I actually spend time investing in myself, what kind of natural overflow will that do for me? And I know that for myself, when I get to the point where I'm like, oh, well, I can cancel that massage because I'm so busy, I don't have time to do that, or whatever it is, I always have to check myself and say, what would I tell someone that I'm sitting across from in my office? I would tell them like, don't cancel. Like, that is how you refill your tank back up. And if your tank is perpetually empty, how do you plan on pouring into someone that's asking of you? Or how do you show up for your kids or your spouse or your friends? And so preaching to myself, I always be like, no, like, this is the thing that makes me feel better. This is the thing that I need to do. And so I'm going to do it. So I'm going to challenge you, show up for yourself, hold that journaling appointment, or that time where you spend every day being mindful or writing down the things that you're grateful for, or your yoga time or whatever that is. Like, do it, because the benefits are amazing. And I think that you'll really see that overflow into like every area of your life. And if we were in person, I'd be like, so what kind of pushback do you have for me? What kind of questions do you have for me? And since we're not in person, I think I will introduce Jordan now, and he can kind of tell you about his technology and how they maybe fill in the gaps of something that I've shared tonight.
Yeah. Thanks, Crystal. Hey, everyone. Happy to be here. A little bit background about what I do. So Nookshook is the company that I co-founded with my co-founder, Ann Konechny. And the idea behind the company is very much about small habits every day will create enormous changes over time, right? And that is very much the basis of what we built this application to be about. And if you guys have ever seen an Inukshuk, they're the rock formations that kind of stack on top of each other that looks like a human. You may see that in Canada or the Olympics. But the origin of Inukshuk is these rocks stacked on top of each other, used by the Inuit people back when we didn't have Google Maps, when we didn't have MapQuest, and wouldn't be able to tell which way to go, right? So they would stack these Inukshuks on top of each other at critical points of junctions as a way to serve as a guidepost. So in the old Inuit language, it means guidepost. And our company, Nookshuk, is to pay homage to that old idea of guiding. So our purpose is really to create a digital platform to help people achieve very much the same stuff that Crystal just spoke about, right? Whether it's a financial goal, physical goal, mental goal, positivity goal that you have. We really believe that when you can put it down and track it on a daily basis and turn it into a habit, that's really when you can see growth in the long term, right? So there are a lot of habit trackers out there, or you can just use pen and paper. All of those things are the right things to do. But in experimenting with different softwares and kind of messing with all of those things, we found that there are three things that really actually help people change your habits, right? So the first thing is flexibility in how you define a habit. So, for example, when you're going to shopping for the groceries, you might just have a list of things and you do check, check, check. That might be good for some habits, but when it comes to things like, running 10 miles a week or sleeping 8 hours a day, when it gets a little bit more numerical, that's a little bit harder to track, right? And you may want to see over time what the average is for a numeric habit. Another example would be tracking calories, right? MyFitnessPal is a great app for that, to track your calories. But at the same time, you kind of want to be able to track habits like your calories along with maybe yes, no habits. And then some habits are more subjective, right? For example, today, let me be a more thankful person. It's not quite a yes or no answer on that, nor is it a numeric answer where I was thankful 10 times today, right? But it's more on a scale of 1 to 10. How well did I do on being a more positive person? So our app really put a lot of thoughts and effort into allowing everyone to track habits however they want, right? So that's kind of the first thing that I think is important in enacting change and building habits. The second one is accountability, right? So that's something that Crystal touched on in having a reliable person that you can go to every single week, right? For us, the way we built it was you can connect with any accountability that you have or friends via the app on Android or Apple. And you guys can like each other's progress on any habits, and you can message each other. For example, if Rob is trying to, uh, you know, sleep 8 hours a day, and he's been putting in 6 hours for the last 2 days. If he shares that habit with me, I can see that, and I can, shoot him a quick message in app and say, "Hey, Rob, try to go to bed early tonight. Stop watching so much Game of Thrones," or whatever it is, right? And just the fact of knowing that someone is going to be there to potentially, congratulate you, right? On the flip side, if Rob is sleeping 10 hours a day, right? Not because he's not working hard, but he's actually getting enough snooze in, right? I can like his habit. I can message him and say, "Hey, Rob, really glad you're doing a great job of getting enough sleep, getting enough rest. I know that's important." Just the fact that Rob know that there's an accountability partner that's kind of like seeing some stuff, or that may be there to remind him to do things, right? May encourage him to do get an extra night of sleep. That's really above and beyond what he's able to do, right? So, and that's something that I found myself to have a tendency of doing, which is putting myself last a lot of times, right? So if someone's counting on me to get something done, I get it done. But when it's something that may be just about myself, on whether it's developing my mental health or emotional health, I may put that on the bottom of the list. And that's why, having an accountability partner, we think, is really important. And numerous studies in the past have shown time and time again, right? Personal intervention is the right move. And that's when you have the most amount of success over time, right? That's why I think there's an incredible amount of value in having a mentor, and having a counselor, and having a therapist, or just a friend to check in on a weekly basis. And then the third thing to really help have the maximum amount of probability of succeeding in developing a habit is just repetition, right? The way I think about it is a lot of times we have this idea that things will change overnight, right? When it's the New Year's, it's like, all right, well, I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week now, and I'm going to, lift 100 pounds in 2 weeks. And I'm going to get that super buff. I'm going to lose a ton of weight. And what happens there a lot of times is that we get burnt out, right? Because we went from not going to the gym at all to going to the gym 7 times a day, right? It's kind of just like a elastic band that hasn't been stretched in a while, and you stretch it just too much and it's going to snap, and you're going to go back to equilibrium of, I can't do it. I can't be a gym person 7 times a day, right? Or seven days a week. But if you think about it, if we go the route of consistent but slowly, rather than fast but infrequently, you can actually achieve that result more readily, right? So if you just add maybe 1 pound of weight to your lifts every single week, that's 52 extra pounds of weight that you can lift by the end of the year. And these incremental progress, as long as you're consistent about it, studies have shown time and time again that that's when habits form, and that's when you can really just get into a groove. And instead of focusing on, I'm going to get this done within 2 weeks, it becomes a habit, and you're going to see the results exponentially multiply over time. And that's why our app also has notifications that you can set to customize it to however you want, right? You can set a notification that just harasses you every 5 minutes from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. on eating salad. Or you can customize it to remind yourself to keep your buddy accountable, right? So I can actually set a reminder on Rob's habit of sleeping well, right? So it could ping me at 8 p.m. the night before and say like, hey, Rob, remind Rob to check into his sleeping well habit, right? And then that will serve as a reminder for me to help Rob reach his goals. So we have all these things on the technology side. I don't mean to get into all the features we have, but I want to give you the reasons behind a lot of what we do. And at the end of the day, you know, we're all trying to become a better version of ourselves tomorrow than today, right? And there are different ways to go about it. You can do pen and paper, you can do a bunch of different things. We think that Nookshuk has a good enough platform for you to achieve that, whether it's by yourself or with an accountability partner. And we really do think that, you know, with an accountability partner, you can go much farther, right? With accountability, with a counselor, or you can even set up a habit of saying, see my therapist once a week. And that is an extra step, right? To get you to not cancel on your appointment, to get you to touch base and track where you are, right? And we have, you know, a ton of analytics and all of those things, because we believe at the end of the day, what gets measured actually improves, right? What doesn't get measured will never get improved. Now, personally, you know, I have some habits on there that I really enjoy. For example, with 2020, with the way it is, one habit I really enjoy putting in there is just writing things down that I'm grateful for every single day, right? And also a meditation habit. And we actually have meditation content on the app where you can just touch meditation, the habit, and it'll bring you to a meditation page, and you can listen to like a 2-minute meditation and it'll automatically check you in. So, and same thing for things you're grateful for, right? If you touch on that habit, it can just bring you to the page of you writing down a thing you're grateful for. And that will automatically check you in. So instead of the pen and paper where you see, oh, I have to write down 5 things I'm grateful for, I bring out a notebook, I write down 5 things I'm grateful for, I go back to my checklist and I check it off. Here, it's just, you know, touch a button and you can jot down what you're grateful for and you're done with that habit. So, you know, I'm a big fan of the technology. It's free. It's on both Android and Apple. And I think, you know, what we're doing here is to absolutely complement things that Crystal is doing in a professional setting, right? For people who just don't have access to, you know, a counselor or a mentor of sort, right? Or infrequently, you can really use Nookshuk to keep you on track between your session today and the next session. Or if you don't have a counselor at all, right? It can kind of be that tool for you to stay accountable, to be kinder to yourself, right? And to improve yourself and track your metrics of becoming physically better or mentally better, emotionally better, whatever your goals may be. And yeah, I mean, you know, we're excited that we're launching this, and it's, again, absolutely free. And the app is spelled as NUKSHUK. And if you have any feedback, you know, always happy to listen to feedback, and you can just email us with any features that you guys want to add, and with big goals for the platform. But we hope that the tool can help you guys track any habits that you may want to build in 2021. And I find that the earlier you start tracking those habits before the January crowd, you're actually going to be more successful. So with that, I'll turn back to Rob.
I appreciate that, Jordan and Crystal, both. Thank you again for taking the time to be here with us this evening. One of the things that of course, you guys opened up my thought with this. So one of the things that I hadn't stopped to think about, right, was this accountability and the accountability partner. and having that. And I guess I really want to kind of hear from both of you through that process. Crystal, with this idea of having an accountability partner, is this something that you suggest to clients basically as you're having your conversations and your dialogue with them, but taking what you guys talk about and then kind of putting it into action? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah. Well, I think when you sign up for counseling and that's something that you consistently do, that provides accountability in and of itself, because they know that at their next appointment, I'm going to be like, hey, remember that assignment we talked about? Did you get to that? And so that knowing that someone is asking provides that like little bit of push to just follow through with it. But also I know, like, I have conversations with people that's like, hey, have this conversation with what you're working on with your best friend or with your spouse, because again, anytime that you know that someone knows, in the back of your mind, anytime you push back or you're like, oh, I don't want to do this, or, it's not great to always sit in feelings or hard things. It's not always the funnest thing to do, but when you have someone who's checking and when you push yourself to do it, there's just so much benefit that comes from that. So yes, I think accountability is huge, because it gets just that added push that motivates us and gets us to do it.
Gotcha. And Jordan, along the same lines, I don't know if you have and where I'm coming from is I am definitely one of those folks that, the accountability idea, right? The first thought that kind of flows through my mind is, I don't want to bother somebody else. But I do know that when I have somebody else, for example, that may be like waiting for me at the gym, or somebody who I just know is going to be doing the exact same thing I am doing at the same point in time, it's given me a little bit more kind of drive from that perspective. So I didn't know if you had seen like success amounts, like if there's a number or any kind of metrics that you guys have taken into consideration with that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of our leading thesis, right, going into building Nookshook, because we looked at a ton of different apps, and we actually went into their discussion forums and look at most frequent feature requested, and across the board, for a lot of apps, it's just accountability, right? Can I add my family on here? Can I somehow share this with my family without just taking screenshots and then sending it to them, right? So actually in the beginning stages, to test the idea of whether this idea works at all, right? And my co-founder and I would just text each other our habits and how we did that day, right? So before we have any tracking, I would say, for example, this is how many calories I've consumed today at the end of the day, right? And she would send over, whatever her habits are. And then every Sunday, we would have a scheduled standing call where we have a list of questions. Some of them are like, what went well this week and what didn't go well so week? What are some red flags coming up next week? And what are your strategies for tackling those? And essentially, we really took that and ran with it to build out Nookshook. And in fact, any user who uses Nookshook will get a reminder at the end of their week to fill out an assessment form of those exact same questions for self-reflection, right? Because that's also accountability to yourself, right? Of how did you do if you don't have an accountability partner. But at the end of the day, I think, having someone there to really keep you accountable it is critical to and will help a tremendous amount in helping you achieve whatever habits you want to create.
That's cool. Yeah, the other thing that really kind of hit me just listening to what you guys were sharing was so you've got this huge task, right? That, well, in your mind, you've made it out to be this huge task, and breaking it down into smaller, more capable aspects of that. And kind of, Crystal, I want to kind of swing it back over. Is there I don't want to say is there a regular size, right? Because I don't want to say one size fits everybody necessarily, but in being able to kind of step back and kind of look at projects and being able to break them down into smaller aspects. Have you seen major I guess success with being able to kind of break those down, or what does that success kind of look like, I guess?
I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like on the counseling side, as it relates to goals, anytime that you make something, I guess, smaller, you have more ability to see growth, because you, versus like something where, like he gave, for example, of going to the gym, and I have this outlandish goal, you're going to get discouraged because you don't see that change immediately. But I don't think that's realistic for anything. And so anytime you break something down that's measurable, or it's more, you can look at it and say, I can accomplish that. Like I can journal twice a week. That's no big deal, versus like, I need to journal 30 minutes every day. It's like, who does that? I mean, some people do, but when you're starting out with something, having something that you can actually reach, I think also is very encouraging, and allows you to stick with it, because it's not something that feels so big to where on a day that maybe is a bit harder, you don't get automatically discouraged, or you can't see progress immediately. And so I guess in that way, I think breaking it down makes it feel like you can accomplish it quicker and just see progress more so.
Cool. And that, I mean, it totally makes sense, right? But of course, we all approach it by, I'm going to take on the entire elephant, right? Instead of breaking it down into bite-sized pieces there. And then Jordan, I just want to kind of swing it back over to you here. So I would also think that this would probably be one of the components that you guys really kind of looked at. And again, I don't know if you guys if you've seen any numbers or success rate with people continuing through to completion of a goal with being able to break it down into smaller chunks.
Oh, yeah. We haven't tracked those metrics because for privacy reasons, we encrypt our users' data, and we don't go in there and look at how someone's doing and whether they've done X amount of whatever. But I do think, like, absolutely, breaking it down is going to be important to success in the long term, right? Just like, if you go to a gym, you wouldn't try to lift 350 pounds the first day, right? You'll work up to it. And, in our app, we try to help that out a little bit. Ideally, you would already know what it looks like to break down this big goal you have into tiny pieces. But you may need the help of a mentor or a counselor like Crystal. On our software, we have suggested habits for each category to really make it so that it's not like a blank page that someone has to fill, right? So they can go to positivity and they can see, I can just add this habit, which is be a more positive person, or smile a little bit more today on an effort scale of 5 days a week. We try to do that a little bit in our app in terms of suggested habits and template habits that people can use as well.
Yeah, that's pretty helpful. I'm sure the shock of walking in having a blank page would be a little bit daunting for folks. Again, raising that level. So I want to turn the conversation over. I don't know if there are any other questions that we've got for our speakers this evening, but I want to give that opportunity. Either Jennifer or Carol, if you guys have anything, we'd love to hear from you.
Actually, I do have a question, and I apologize if I missed anything that you said, Jordan. With the app, they say that it takes, X amount of days, what was it, 30 days or something like that, typically to form a habit. Are you seeing anything in your metrics where it takes less time than that to actually form a habit?
Yeah, so Carol, I'll be honest with you. Like, I personally went in and looked at like a bunch of different science research studies, and every study is different, right? Like some would say 78 days, some would say 30 days. Unfortunately, I just don't think there is a magic number. there, but it really just comes down to consistency, right? And building a ritual and lowering the friction of that it takes to get something done, right? So I don't have a hard number for you in terms of how many days it takes, but I can tell you that, people who, for example, put their gym clothes right next to their bed, so that the first thing they see when they wake up is that actually their gym clothes, or even where they're wearing their gym clothes to sleep, so that when they wake up, there isn't that barrier to putting on gym clothes in order to go to gym, right? So anything that lowers the friction. And then there's another interesting study by, his name is escaping me, but he was a Cornell professor who was studying specifically nutrition and people's habits around those, right? And I'm sure maybe you guys have heard of this, but he found that food that are at grocery stores that are at eye level are often purchased more often than food that are at lower level, right? Because you have to bend down and reach up to pick them up. So that concepts can be applied to your personal habit, right? So for example, if you open your fridge and the first things you see are leftover Chinese food or pizza, there's less of a friction for you to just go and grab that leftover food and eat it. Whereas if you kind of fill the eye level aisle with food like vegetables, fruit, or whatever those may be, it makes it easier for you to accomplish the habit of eating more vegetables. Having a jar of chocolate in the middle of your table when you come home is going to be, it's going to lower that friction for you to just eat chocolate. So that was kind of a long answer, but no, I don't have a magic number on the number of days it takes to build a habit or break a habit. But there are these, it's that lowering the friction cost of doing something and increasing the friction cost of getting rid of a bad habit you have will definitely expedite that process a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great answer, but and it also leads me to ask one other thing is, oftentimes people take a habit and transfer that habit onto another bad habit. And I know the whole concept behind the app is to break those habits and disrupt those habits, but is there anything that tracks it keeps you from forming or replacing that habit with another bad one?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Unfortunately, we don't have that nuance built in. That is something that we may consider kind of like tracking the future, but at the moment we don't have that feature available.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
If I could add something to that, it might be worth exploring whatever that habit is that you're replacing it with. What is that potentially that you're avoiding, or choosing the bad habit to numb, or instead of doing something harder. And so from the counseling perspective, I would add, what's the motivation behind that? Because typically there would be something negative that's driving it. And so something to think about there.
Yeah. That's great feedback, Carol and Crystal. And the one thing that we're doing really, that's kind of, it's not live yet, but it's our B2B product to really connect a coach to the app, right? So some of these things that are a little bit hard to realize yourself, right? Because how do I realize that I'm building a bad habit off of a good habit? A lot of times it's hard to realize that by yourself, and it's easier when you have a coach or a counselor who can point you and basically break that down for you, right? For example, having Crystal see my habits and say, well, actually, Jordan, what's the motivation behind you changing that habit? So we are building that functionality where, someone like Crystal or a mentor can actually see your progress and potentially send you habits, and have you track those habits, and then also have weekly discussions around that.
Yeah, that's great. I know that what was coming to my mind when I thought of that was, I know that there's some apps out there kind of geared towards around food, and you enter data into it, say, I'm going to have like chips, and
Right.
it will give you an alternative to what to eat instead of eating those chips. Like, instead of having that bad habits of replacing the chips with maybe another type of chip that maybe is not fried, it's still not good for you, but instead it says, hey, maybe you could just eat like carrots or something like that
Yeah.
to help you with the better habit.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I appreciate that. Those were great. That's a great question, Carol. Okay, so any other questions that we've got? And I want to open it up. Jordan, anything that you are interested in asking Crystal, anything that you're interested in asking Jordan?
I want to say thank you, Jordan, for joining us. Crystal, not to tell you not to thank you as well, but Jordan's a personal contact of mine, so I've been dragging him out into all kinds of events. So I love Jordan, and you guys are a great compliment to each other in this kind of setting. I know Crystal personally with my therapist, that anytime I know that I have to go back and talk to her and tell her that I have or have not done my homework is yeah, I'll always start with that. I haven't done what you asked me to do, but it's a good motivator, and the accountability factor is hands down huge with anything. For me, with working out, with I asked a friend over the course of this last year to hold me accountable to something I was working on personally, and was having her just text me and check in, and that was before there was the Android version of Nookshuk, which we've got now. But so it's it's kind of a no-brainer there. So I know that this has been many years coming for Jordan, and he's been very, very thoughtful in what they've done and how they've put it together. So can't wait to see it grow.
Appreciate it, Jennifer.
I'm excited. Like, I'm going to refer it to clients, because I know that, we talk about exactly what you've described it as. So I was excited to hear about it, and I'll definitely be like, hey, look up this.
Yeah. And Crystal, like maybe offline we can connect on, it would be interesting to see if you're willing to beta test potentially the software version. There's definitely some HIPAA compliant concerns I have about, what information you can track and online and all of those things. But if you're interested, we can have that conversation.
Yeah,
offline.
for sure. That'd be great.
You know what, Carol? I'd be interested, as you sit and think about it, to hear what you kind of come up with. Carol has a lot of history, HR, organizational effectiveness, employee engagement. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to think, Carol, as you mull it over. Just from an engagement, not an engagement perspective. My words are escaping me right now, but I think there's a way that it couldn't necessarily be used for employee growth, but I think that within the right culture, it's something that could be used. Do you understand where I'm going, Carol?
Yes, I think possibly you could be mean like performance, because I know that people have performance goals.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be a personal choice. And obviously we're talking about, when you're working with mentors and that kind of thing, um, you know, it, but it, if people are gathering within groups, within the workplace, whether it's for mentorship or growth. I mean, obviously personal growth goals could be mixed in with your professional growth goals, but I do think it's something that could be brought into the workplace, and you would be a good mind on what that could potentially look like. So
Yeah. Any developmental opportunities I would think would be absolutely perfect. For example, if one of the developmental kind of goals that somebody was given was to speak up more in meetings, to be able to allow, their thought process to be heard. I could definitely see, the Nookshuk actually being a really good option for that, or opportunity for that, as well as it being kind of an opportunity to be able to give people that positive support.
Yep, absolutely. Those are great feedback, and definitely something that's within our radar in terms of things to explore as well.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I love the fact that we were able to bring the community together and be able to kind of, walk through this this evening, talking about improving, habits, especially this time of season.